The Treasury Select Committee, I've got a thing about select committees. I think they're amongst the most important institutions in our democracy. You keep an eye on what the Treasury are up to. And what worries me most about this conversation, and we've talked to Julian Jessup, former Treasury man, Nigel Nelson from the Mirror is in here with me, and across the spectrum, including the Taxpayers Alliance, the consensus is it's a no-win for the Treasury. Cut taxes without spending cuts, things get worse. Don't help folk, and your party gets hammered even more. How do you finesse it?
Well, Alistair, I agree with you entirely. Select committees are really important. They're definitely the most constructive thing I've been involved with since I entered Parliament 7 years ago. We take a very independent look at what the Treasury is doing. I think the government's got to be very careful. There's only a certain amount of money you can spend. The number one thing we've got to try and do is get inflation under control. That's actually a responsibility of the Bank of England. We've given Gordon Brown, actually some time ago, gave the Bank of England independence. It needs, unfortunately, to increase interest rates and reduce the amount of quantitative easing, which is the printing of digital money that's put into the economy to try and slow the economy down or slow the growth in prices in the economy down. That's the number one thing. In the meantime, the government's put quite a lot of money in, £37 billion of support in to help households. And for the lowest income households, that almost completely offsets the cost of the increase in energy prices. So that has definitely helped to a great degree. But the more it does, the more it'll fuel inflation, of course. That's the difficulty. It's a very difficult balancing act to strike.
Sure, I understand that.
Chancellor's doing a good job.
No, I absolutely understand that. I wanted to hear the whole argument, and I did clearly, but I do want to pick up one point. You just said that you think that spring statement package from Rishi, which he and the Prime Minister detail bit by bit by bit in the Sun newspaper today in 2 pages, you said that should pretty well cover the increase in energy costs. Are you sure about that? Right.
Yes, it's the lowest income households, yes, about £1,200.
But for the bulk of us, it doesn't come anywhere near that.
Well, there's only 2 ways you can offset the cost of the increase in living costs, and that is either the people who are suffering those living costs, you and me, Alistair, and other households around the country pay more or less of our monthly budgets, or the taxpayer pays, and that's the same cohort of people, of course, in many cases. Yeah. So where are you going to get the money from? There's only so much the Treasury can do. Yeah. And so I think we've got to tread very carefully. And the more it does, of course, the more it fuels inflation. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So there is only a limited room for manoeuvre. I think what the Chancellor sought to do is to mitigate the increasing the cost of living for the lowest income households. That's the most sensible way of doing it. That's what I saw all the economists were calling for before the Chancellor acted. So I think what he's done is pretty sensible and strikes the right balance.
That's the second time, Kevin, that you've said there's only a certain amount of money that the government can spend. You said that earlier on when the conversation started. I'm not trying to be silly or tricky here because you speak eloquently for the good people of Thirsk and Moulton, and you are a member of the Treasury Select Committee. But am I right to draw the conclusion that you, as a Conservative Member of Parliament who also happens to be on the Treasury Select Committee, is slightly more with the cautious Chancellor and Treasury team than the perhaps less cautious and more generous Prime Ministerial team?
Well, you're speculating on things I don't know about, Alistair. I speak to the Prime Minister about this stuff, and you say he's calling for more support. Maybe. I think that what the government has to do is look at this stuff as it evolves. It may be a situation where the cost of living crisis gets worse. I hope it doesn't. I think there's a good chance that inflation will drop out pretty quickly. And that's certainly what most economists seem to think will happen. But I mean, we just can't keep on spending. I mean, the opposition has promised £100 billion of extra spending without saying where it's going to come from, or only to a limited degree it has. So I say it's taxpayers' money. The government doesn't have any money. It's taxpayers' money. It's got to be paid back. We're already £2.36 trillion in debt. If you throw more money at it, that debt will simply increase, and the cost of servicing the debt will actually grow and grow and grow. So it's a very difficult situation. And these are international pressures, of course. The vast majority of inflation, the rise in the cost of living, are global pressures. So there's only a certain amount you can do about it in any shape or form. So it is pretty tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. Kevin, stay exactly where you are. I'll come straight back to you, but the next voice that you will hear after mine is Nigel Nelson, who's been sitting here patiently listening to our conversation. Incredibly eloquent backbencher there who's on the Treasury Select Committee. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but nearly 4. There is a limit to what the government can spend. Hopefully, the worst will fall out through the natural economic cycle.
Well, we hope it will. But, I mean, I'm not sure I'm quite as optimistic as Kevin is about that actually happening. Now, Kevin talks about the
worst pressures falling out because economic cycles run for a period of time.
Yes, that's right. And the idea that we're going to come out of it by the end of the year, I just don't think is hugely likely. I mean, the point I would just sort of pick Kevin up on. He talks about raising interest rates to try and control inflation. Of course, that's a standard way of doing it. You take money out of the economy, you encourage people to save rather than spend. However, that also puts mortgages up. So the result is that the cost of living crisis then hits your ordinary people once again. So it is a bit of a catch-22. There's no magic bullet for something like this, but I'm not sure that is necessarily the answer that we're looking for. It's part of the answer, but not the full thing.
Kevin, coming back to you, and I hope you heard what Nigel was just saying there. I remember, and actually talked to Ed Bulls in some detail about it at the time of that big decision to say the Bank of England the government will set an inflation target, but the Bank of England polices it. And all sorts of people, I think yourself included, have said, well, they've taken their eye a little bit off the ball. The other lively debate at the time was that the Bank of England, in step with the Treasury, should also have a target for economic growth. The Bank of England should be helping with growth as well. You're a former businessman. You were an estate agent involved in employing people and making money before you came into politics. Isn't that the way forward as well? Growth is the answer to everything.
Well, I agree with that. We've got to have a more productive economy, a more prosperous economy. And I think that's the government's job rather than the Bank of England, principally. The Bank of England has one job, really, is to keep inflation under control. And I agree. I think it took its eye off the ball latter part of last year on that and didn't really take account of the specific pressures the UK will experience due to things like Brexit, for example, because labour shortages are more profound in the UK than elsewhere. So just to correct Nigel on one thing, I didn't say inflation would drop out of the system this year, not at all. I think the economic forecasters we've spoken to are talking 2 to 3 years, but most have said it should come back to 2 to 3% within 2 to 3 years. That's where I expect it to be. In terms of other measures we can utilise, I'm happy to listen to ideas from Nigel or anybody else in how we can mitigate the costs of living pressures. But in the short term, that's very, very difficult. Yes, he's absolutely right. As you increase interest rates, it puts household budgets under pressure. But that's that's part of the whole equation, is you slow down consumer spending, which should start to mitigate some of the domestic pressures on inflation.
Next voice you will hear will be, again, Nigel answering your question. You began our conversation at 12 o'clock with 1 or 2 of your own ideas. Share them with Kevin.
Well, I mean, the obvious way to deal with the cost of living crisis is below inflationary wages rises. That is the most effective way of doing it. And it's no good the government trying to restrict that to 2 and 3%. That just does not cut it. I don't want to see above inflationary rises, because that will make it worse. I think also we have to actually look at the world of work. That's another bigger subject. And also we've got a very grumpy workforce at the moment, understandably so. Let's cheer them up a bit.
Yeah. Kevin, do you think on that, I know what you will say a bit about inflationary pressures, because you've already been very, very clear about that. But even a cost of living pay rise right now would have to be in the region of 7, maybe even 8%. But it puts money back in people's pockets. They can earn a wee bit more before they have to pay any national insurance, and that is a great thing. I repeat my point. If we stimulate the economy, if we get growth going, then lo and behold, borrowing comes down, public spending on things like benefits comes down a wee bit. That's the magic wand, is it not?
Well, yes, definitely. That growth in the economy, that more productive economy we all want to see, absolutely right. And I think the whole levelling up thing, from the north and for the north, totally believe in that. And but that's a very long-term problem. I mean, the economic disparity between the northeast and the London and the southeast is as wide as it was between East and West Germany prior to reunification. That took 3 decades to solve that problem. Those are long-term issues. The short-term issues are much more difficult. I think we do need to see pay restraint. I mean, it's easy for me to say that, but nevertheless, because I know household budgets are under pressure. But if inflation sets in, if wage increases are at inflationary levels, then inflation will set in more permanently. That's very damaging for the economy, very damaging for jobs, and the devastation on those households will be much worse if we go down that route. These should be short-term pressures. The Chancellor stepped in with some short-term mitigations, some solutions to some household problems. I think we've just got to grin and bear it and get through these next 12, 18 months till we see the peak. Inflation should have peaked by then and should then be coming down back to the other side of the graph.
Final question to you, Kevin, if I may, and I want you to metaphorically take your Treasury Select Committee hat off and put it there, and I'm talking to you directly as a leading backbencher, a member of the Conservative Party who represents the good people of Thirsk and Moulton. Great prime ministers can tell their chancellors what to do when they're riding on the crest of a wave, whether it's Tony Blair or Margaret Thatcher versus Gordon Brown or Nigel Lawson. This Prime Minister, whether you think he's innocent or guilty of things like Partygate, of things like handling the Chris Pincher case, a whole range of issues on that charge sheet, his authority is damaged, and that makes it very difficult for your party, does it not?
Well, I think it's been a difficult time, there's no doubt about it. But I think we had the vote of confidence. He won that vote of confidence. He gets 12 months to put things right. And I think the next 12 months are absolutely critical. Do I think the Prime Minister can get back on top, win back the confidence of the party? Yes, I do. But it's tough, a tough time. But there are no easy solutions to these problems. We've just got to stay focused, do the right thing, and build back a reputation for calm competence. That's what we need to do.
What would your message be to those fellow backbench Tories who seem to be trying to find any which way to not have to wait another year to test his popularity within the parliamentary party, but find another route to test him again?
Well, I said, together we stand, divided we fall. I think it doesn't serve anybody's purpose other than, may I say, Alistair, you're always very fair in your questioning, but it serves the media's purpose and it serves the opposition's purpose if we're divided. So I would say get behind the Prime Minister. Let's see what we can do over the next 12 months.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.